It really is not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. I say that not to scare you. I just say it because it's the truth. We're all going to have some sort of breach. It could be somebody contacting your bookkeeper or your controller in your name and saying, hey, wire me 50 grand. Believe it or not, the smartest Wharton School graduates still wire people the money. They think it's you. All right, so welcome everybody. As you all know, this presentation is for UTCA members. Really excited to have all of you here. I know some of you we've talked to in the past. Some of you may be experiencing us for the first time. I'm Matt Rosenthal. I am the CEO and the owner of Mindcore Technologies. With us, we also have Matt Kosha. He's a VP here at Mindcore, and we have a very special guest who's going to jump in about 10 minutes. His name is Brian. Brian, I'm going to pronounce your last name, and I'm not sure if I'm going to get it right, but I'm going to say Haugli. He's a CISO. He's going to actually explain to you what that means. It's why it's important to you. And one of the things that I find coolest about him, aside from the fact he's a great guy, is he's a former head of cybersecurity at the Pentagon. So hopefully everybody listens to what he has to say and we take him seriously. But for me today and for us, our goal is pretty straightforward. We want to deliver information to all of you that at the very least inspires thought and gives you something to think about that's valuable in terms of what pretty much is the biggest risk right now for your business, which is cybersecurity. So if you have any questions, I have a spot at the end where we hope you all have questions and we can talk through those. But that's really it. We're here to be a resource at this point and to really just give you guidance and share information. So with that, let's see. Just a quick overview for those of you that don't know about us. We are based in Fairfield, New Jersey. We've been there, since the inception of the company back in '99. We are a technology service provider. Some people call that a TSP. We spend a lot of time with our clients focusing on strategic IT conversations, strategic cybersecurity conversations, and really just focusing on giving you the guidance that you need to make good decisions, for your IT and make sure it lines up with your business goals and your strategy. We've been a partner at the UTCA for several years now. We do service other members, and we've had a really great experience. We do miss the events. I'm glad that they're starting up again, but we've really been really happy, as part of this organization. We serve a wide range of industries, and I know some of you, although you're all in the same general industry, there's different specialties you all have, but we service pretty much anybody that has the singular need to want to have strategic IT guidance and have their systems working well and proactively. So we do that by delivering our services where we understand your business and we align your business initiatives and your goals to make sure that your IT actually supports what you're trying to do. Right now, as I said before, the main focus that we have is on cybersecurity, it's on cloud, and it's on collaboration tools. I mean, frankly, that's what everybody needs. And that's what the conversations are about. It's been many years sort of in the making to get to the point where those 3 C's, cyber, cloud, and collaboration tools, have really become the sort of streamlined, sort of singular conversation that guide all of your IT decisions. We do phone systems as well, which is what VoIP is, and of course we do day-to-day IT service. And again, we do that for many of your colleagues. Our point of view on most things begins with risk management. We don't know where to guide you. We don't know what you need or what the best solution is going to be for you, really, until we understand the risks that you have and make sure we mitigate that. And then we act as a thought leader with planning and guidance. So you may have IT companies already, but those are the things that you want from your IT company, and that's who we are, and that's what we do. This, I think, is the most powerful piece of what we're going to talk about today. And it's through a lot of experience. And again, Brian's going to really dive into it. We believe, and we've seen now, that the number one risk to every business, including our own business, is a cybersecurity breach. Okay, and that's why we take it so seriously. It is not client loss. These are all important things, but these are not the biggest risks because they don't happen overnight. It's not client loss. It's not your sales, marketing, branding, HR, accounting, client satisfaction. These are all things we all as business owners or business leaders, we know that we have more control over which direction they go. Are we going to expand or are we going to contract? Are we going to put a plan in place? Those things happen over time. Cybersecurity breach and what it does to your business doesn't happen over time. It'll happen right now. It takes a minute, and the impact is pretty staggering. I know Brian has a story he's going to tell us about that pipeline that went down, and it's interesting. The information he's going to share is really powerful. And when he and I talked about it yesterday, I'm not going to ask where he gets his information, but it's very insightful, and it's really interesting to find out what's really happened with that. But it can happen to a business that has 5 people or an organization that has 1,000 employees. It doesn't matter. The risks are still the same, and they'll still bring you down. I'm going to share 2 stories with you quickly. You may relate to one or the other as far as who your company is, but there's a reason why I'm sharing these with you. The first one began with a phishing scam. And I'm sure all of you get these emails that say, hey, click on this link. It looks like it's from Microsoft. It says reset your password. And you may click on it because it looks legit. I'm sorry, there's a noise in the background, which I can't control. I apologize for that. This first company we're going to talk about, they do 20 million a year. They have 50 employees. Over last Thanksgiving weekend, they got breached. Now, nobody was paying attention because everybody was busy eating their turkey, but they had a breach. The attack impacted their production data. It impacted their backup data. Essentially, what it did do is it destroyed all their servers, all their databases, all their information. They were down for 3 days, and frankly, we got them back up when it should have been down for 3 weeks. I can't say that we did anything that was, we're not Superman, but we just so happened we were able to piece together some remnants of different pieces of what wasn't encrypted and what was available. And we got lucky, really. I have good engineers, but we got lucky that they had some data we could put back together. They should have been down for at least 3 weeks. I do know that the cost was $115,000, and that was for a combination of us, the combination of a cybersecurity company, a third party that does sort of like more advanced activities. We had to bring them in, and a few other costs that they had. There's an unknown cost still to this day of what the lost revenue was and the lost productivity was, but it did take them a while to get back up and running. Even though we had them up and running in 3 days, it took them a while to get themselves kind of back in action. Client relationships, I don't know, and they don't know. They had a lot of unhappy customers. Now they're in the business of producing something. They're a manufacturer, but unhappy customers, who knows what the cost was to that. Company number 2, same thing, email scam, phishing scam, led to a breach. Big difference. 400 employee firm. This is a nonprofit organization. They do have HIPAA compliance, which I know doesn't apply to you guys. They had 6 mailboxes breached and a lot of emails flying around, and they jumped on it quickly. These people were in the process of gathering information. They were in the systems, like they were on the server. They didn't get as far as encrypting the servers and doing what had happened to the first company, because in the case of the first company I talked about, they were on the systems for weeks, and it wasn't detected for a variety of reasons, which we'll get to. The impact in this case was minimized. They had proactive systems in place. They were doing things differently, okay? They remediated quickly, they were alerted quickly, they took action quickly. And here's the thing with them, there was no financial impact. They didn't even go down. They had no lost revenue, and nothing really happened. The only difference between these 2 companies, other than the fact that one was a nonprofit and one was a profitable firm, the difference is that the nonprofit, the second company, had a different perspective. And that's really what we're trying to really bring to your attention today and to inspire some thought, is on the perspective from which you look at cybersecurity and how important it is to your company, to your organization. A little bit more about the differences. Company 2, the nonprofit, had a plan and they were executing on it. They managed risk. They were having conversations about it. They have a budget for cybersecurity and different aspects of that plan, and it's scheduled and it gets done. They take a proactive stance. Their posture is proactive. They don't have an attitude of it's not going to happen to us. Frankly, they have an attitude, which I would encourage all of you to have, is it will probably happen to some degree, right? don't have an "it won't happen to us" belief. Have a belief that it's going to happen to you. It's going to happen to everybody. The question is, what position are you in when it happens? They did maintain trusted advisor relationships, and they got guidance. They didn't just kind of, make up what they were going to do. They had a partner, and that partner helped them. It's us, but we helped them understand what they should do proactively. In the case of the first story, same guidance, different perspective. It's not going to happen to us. We don't have a budget for it. What's the bare minimum that we can do? Nonprofit, we don't have a lot of money, but we do know we don't want to go down, and we want to keep getting the donations that we get, and we want to keep getting the state funding that we get. And in their case, the state does look at their cybersecurity posture. And I know for many of you that doing government work, if you haven't already, the government is going to begin to say to you, especially with the Department of Labor issuing guidelines, they're going to say to you, we expect you to have certain things in place. And so Company 2 has a similar situation with that. So I point out at the bottom, ironically, Company 1 is a profitable private company. Company 2 is a not-for-profit company, and Company 2 is the one that was far better off. The Department of Labor tips, I'm not going to read through all these. I don't want to waste your time, but I am going to ask the UTCA to send this out to you. I know that many of you attend the meetings that UTCA hosts, and you see other DOL resources. This is here. It is something that again, if you don't have a compliance issue specifically, it's something that the government is encouraging. Things like encrypting your software, your servers, encrypting your computers, putting proactive tools in place to know if there is a threat in your environment, using multi-factor authentication. Brian's going to get into all of these things. These tips at some point may become the law, who knows? But we do know that they're put out there for a reason. And again, I suspect many of you are, when you're bidding on jobs, these are things that you're being asked about. So one thing before we get to Brian is I want to just kind of kick him off with these topics. What is cybersecurity, and why do you need to think about it? Okay, he's going to cover that, but briefly, it's defense against a breach. Okay, we talked about what's going to happen if you get breached, possibly. If you have a proactive or reactive position or posture, that's a cybersecurity mindset, right? You don't want to have the breach. And from what we've seen and experienced with so many people, so many companies, the cost to remediate, to be proactive, is far less than the cost to react. And I demonstrated that for you with Company 1. It really is not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. I say that not to scare you. I just say it because it's the truth. We're all going to have some sort of breach. It could be somebody contacting your bookkeeper or your controller in your name and saying, hey, wire me 50 grand. Believe it or not, the smartest Wharton School graduates still wire people the money. They think it's you. So there's really a posture and a mindset that we want to encourage you to maintain. Everybody's going to be breached at some point. It's not a matter of that. It's a matter of what do you do when it happens, and are you minimizing and mitigating your risk as much as you possibly can to not just minimize what happens, but to minimize whether they can or can't get in. This is cybersecurity. It's a mindset. They're going to get to you with a phishing scam. They're going to get to you with a weakness in your network. They're going to get to you with weaknesses in your current servers and computers and firewalls and switches and printers. Are they updated with the latest security patches? Brian's going to talk about that. Number one risk, my opinion, not going to say it's a fact, lack of employee training. We see the most frequent way people get in, assuming that your network is hardened, is with people clicking on those phishing scams, on those links. And you really can and should educate your employees. And there's ways that you can do that, and Brian's going to take you through that. So, being proactive, having a strong cybersecurity posture, and reducing the gaps, that is what it's all about. With that all being said, and again, in the spirit of educating you, this guy, Brian, there's nobody more qualified that I've ever met to talk about this with your organization today.
Thanks, Matt.
Brian has, he's been driving security programs for 2 decades. This is awesome. He's led the cybersecurity program for the DoD, Department of Defense, the Pentagon, the intelligence community, and currently he works with a lot of Fortune 500 companies. He's a renowned speaker. He'll explain to you what NIST is, but he's an expert on that, threat intelligence and implementations. For us, he's a strategic partner. Okay, we work with you directly, but there's a point in time where you really need to have the highest level expertise, and that's why we have Brian work with us. That's why I wanted to have him speak with you guys today. So to us, his expertise is invaluable, and with all the clients that we deliver cybersecurity leadership to, not in every case, but in many cases, we have Brian supplement what we do because of his constant awareness and understanding of what's happening in real time. So with that, Brian, if you could take yourself off mute, and I'm gonna hand it over to you.
Yep. Thanks. Wow, I've got a lot. I've got a lot to cover. Thanks, Matt. I appreciate everyone taking the time today for another non-Zoom call. Hopefully, we can do this in person sometime. Gladly come on. I'm in the Boston area. I grew up in Bloomfield, New Jersey, right actually off of Bloomfield Avenue. I went to Bloomfield Elementary School. So my dad worked across the river in the city, and grew up in the Jersey area. So would love to come on down and hopefully get one of these events going in person sometime soon. So yeah, just quick resume rundown. Like Matt said, I got my start. I got recruited out of high school as a hacker. I went into the Department of Defense in uniform, served in the U.S. Army, and then left that and went directly into more of the proper structured DoD setting within that federal agency. I've really that's the only federal agency I've known. So, I've never worked with labor, commerce, state, or DHS. I know defense just because that was my world. I had a small time in the intelligence community. Some interesting stories I can tell any of you over beers at some point. I left that. I ran the Pentagon cyber program from 2011 to 2015, and then became the first vice president and chief information security officer for a Fortune 500 insurance company up here in the Boston area. That's why I'm up here. Otherwise, I'd still be living in New York. There's a lot of analogies and a lot of ways to think about cybersecurity, and Matt's touched on some very great tactical elements. I actually, Matt's number one risk is actually one of the top risks, if not, the second one. But the lack of employee training, right? Like we do, HR training to teach people about, what that needs to happen, what those requirements are, and that's mandated and that's followed through. And that actually shows and proves that when you train people on, the right behaviors and the right things, it becomes a learned behavior. You get the outcome you're expecting. Security is the same way. Not everybody understands this space. Not everybody completely, knows it. I get it. Not everybody gets IT and secure or computer systems. I get it. Not that anybody should. It's not your focus. I'm not great at, a ton of things. That's why I rely on experts. But training actually is very, very sound thing. Like you have more people with more information and more access than you actually probably have systems. And it's a much larger attack surface, if you will. The biggest thing I think to think about for today is the internet is essentially, think about it like a bad neighborhood. Like the entire internet is a bad neighborhood. And the reason I give you this to think about is because not everyone, but a lot of people believe, well, nothing's going to happen to me. I'm too small. I'm not in that sector. Years ago it was, I'm not Target or Home Depot. And then it was, well, I'm not Equifax. And this is only happening to these big guys. The reality is, it's actually happening to a lot more than you think. You're just not hearing about it. And I'm not saying that to scare you. I'm just setting the reality that you lock your doors if you live in a bad neighborhood. You put bars on your windows if you unfortunately live in a bad neighborhood. If you live in a good neighborhood, there is a bit of a thinking of, well, nothing's going to happen to me, so maybe I'm not going to lock my doors as much. I live in a very nice neighborhood outside of Boston. At least I believe I do. But I live close enough to a city that doesn't have, a great amount of upstanding citizens, and there is crime. I still lock my doors. But, if I didn't, I would feel as though, okay, I could probably run the risk. But how many times do I run that risk not locking my doors, right? And then someday, somebody down my street gets broken into. Everybody on the street immediately starts locking their doors, right? It's like this just plays out. within security, and it's the same thing. Cybersecurity and physical security, it's the same concepts. I took a lot of what I did out of the DoD and applied it to corporate America early on because no one was thinking about it like this. You can actually defend a position, and that's the whole kind of point. Like, you can defend a position, and a lot of people who come into cyber are unfortunately don't have that type of law enforcement or military background to be able to think about how do you defend something. They're technologists or business people who were given the second or third hat of having to be, now in charge of security. And now you've got traditional IT leaders going, great, now I have to do this. I don't understand it, so I'm just going to do kind of whatever I'm being asked and kind of throw darts blindly. It starts with assessing what your risks are, and again, the house analogy. I know where I live. I know how many windows I have. I know how many front doors, back doors. I know I have an alarm system on my house. I know my neighbors. They look out for me when I'm away. I look out for them. We know when people, that we don't recognize in our neighborhood who they are. We do that, and that's kind of our standard. Like, we've set this a bit of a standard. You have to assess yourself, but you have to assess yourself against what your actual risks are. For a business, it's about defending and protecting what you've built. What have you created? What do you want your legacy to be? What do you want your business to do? Are you looking to build it to sell? Are you looking to build it to hand over to someone else in your family? Are you part of a larger enterprise where there's shareholder and stock considerations that you're trying to drive value into that? If you are creating that as what you are trying to defend, that's a great starting point, and that's where you're going to build from. And I think a lot of people just jump into, well, what do I need to implement? What do I need to go do? What do I need to go turn on inside of my organization to be secure? Well, you need to kind of step back and figure out, what are you actually trying to protect first? Okay, is it your name brand? Is it a key customer or set of customers? Is it compliance because you're held to a regulatory standard? What is that? And then back it up from there. I usually run clients through an exercise where it's like, okay, these 3 customers are your key revenue lines for your company. Great. Okay. What business processes, and hopefully everybody can maybe see me, but if this is, what your revenue line is, okay, what underneath that, what are the systems or applications that are supporting that? What's making that happen? And now, what controls are you putting in place on these systems? A lot of people just jump into, let me just go turn on capabilities here, and we're good. But you don't actually know what you're supporting and defending. So take a step back, figure out what is it that you want to actually secure. What do you want to protect first? Determine that. And that could be a couple things, like I said, brand, revenue line, regulation, and then go in and determine what is supporting that. Now, in order to go do this next level, you need to align yourself to some kind of standard. There are some great US national standards available. People talk about ISO and all these European-centric ones that cost money, and I don't understand it, because your tax dollars and mine are at work and have created a set of standards. And can you, if I draw this, I forget if, is this readable or is this backwards to you, Matt? Does that say NIST? Okay, you can read it? Okay. Sometimes different software flips my screen on me. But right now, there is a standard out there called the NIST CSF, the NIST Cybersecurity Framework. It is a United States national standard developed by NIST, who came out underneath the Department of Commerce and created a set of security standards that you can align to and adopt yourself. It doesn't cost you any money to adopt this versus ISO, which if you say the word ISO, you have to pay money to for the certification because they license and own it. So how do you standardize on something to protect, this top level piece? So I like to start with, if you're not held to anything from a compliance standpoint, use this as a starting point. Figure out what are your controls. And within NIST, there are a set of different controls. You've got protect, detect, respond. Sorry, I messed this up, and I'm foolish. It's identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. I should know this because I've just written the first book on this standard that will be published as an academic book for colleges at the end of this year, beginning of next year. So if you or any of your kids or grandkids are going to school for cybersecurity, you're probably going to read this book if you're in a policy or a governance type of a course within a cybersecurity program starting after spring of 2022. Identify what you have, protect what you have in place, put detection and response capabilities in so that when something goes boom in the night, and it will, you can immediately detect what happens, respond to that, restore operations, restore your capabilities, restore happy customers, and then recover your operations back to a known good state. It's a very simple, very straightforward process. There's a set of controls underneath each of these that you can now dig into and figure out, okay, how do I make sure I'm protecting my organization the most? How do I make sure I have the right detection capabilities in place? How do I know I can ensure recovery operations when something happens to, you know, my CEO or our email system or our booking system or our scheduling platform, whatever it is? There's a series that you can go through and just adopt. So there's a nice, you know, way to just get something going if you're not. I see a lot of clients who are, you know, hey, I think we're pretty good. You know, we've got a great security program. We just, you know, we need to tune up some policies. And we get in there and it's very ad hoc. It doesn't follow a standard. And the reason adopting a standard nowadays is very key is because your customers or your potential customers are asking about your security posture. And how are you able to articulate what you meet? Oh yeah, we have a great security program. What does that mean? Instead of, well, we align ourselves to NIST, you know, the NIST CSF, or, you know, the healthcare community has aligned themselves to the HIPAA security rule. DoD manufacturing contractors, anybody inside the federal government space has aligned themselves to a different NIST standard known as 800-171. Credit card, you know, processing, e-commerce has aligned themselves to PCI. There are all these standards that, you know, regular sectors, other sectors have adopted. And I think with the executive order that just came out yesterday, based on the Colonial pipeline and actually 6 to 8 months worth of work prior, over 2 administrations, there is a new executive order of the federal government that all federal agencies are going to be held to for a new standard, and that is going to start pushing and trickling down. Case in point, New York State Department of Financial Services has a standard called Part 500. It's DFS New York State Part 500. If you do any financial services work, banking, insurance, anything inside of New York State, you have to follow Part 500, completely adopted and based on the NIST cybersecurity framework. So here is a open recognized standard that was adopted by New York State and is now pushed down onto an entire corporate world on how to meet security standards. The SEC has done the exact same thing in their first and second and third waves of examinations of publicly traded companies. They've adopted the NIST cybersecurity framework. Now, again, I'm not saying that's the end all be all. We can pick any standard. My point is pick a standard, see it through, build a program to something that is recognized and structured. Now, how do you do that? Well, you have to do a risk assessment. Again, figuring out what it is that you want to protect first, right? I can't defend what I don't know exists. It's like my mantra, number one. If we don't know about it, how do you expect me to protect anything about it? So let me figure out what it is that we need to protect. Let's get a good inventory of what it is that we own, what you own, and let's start putting in those controls. We do a risk assessment against your organization or just your platform or your revenue line or whatever it is. Figure out what those gaps are. Once we've established what those gaps are, right, now we can start putting together, well, how do we address those gaps, right? It's the same thing as if you're assessing the vulnerable posture or the security posture of your house, and you walk around the house and you're like, hey, why is that window always open? Let's write that down. That's a gap, right? Or the lock on that window is broken, or the garage door code is the default 000. Okay, that becomes part of our gap analysis. And then it's about sitting down and just systematically going through and figuring out, okay, based on our budget this year, what are the things that we can fix? Well, I can reprogram the garage door for free right now. Great, that's a low-hanging fruit. Let's do that today. I can buy a new lock from Home Depot and install that myself. Okay, cool, I can put that on the window. That's a low-cost thing, I can go do that. But me installing ADT, I'm not doing that by myself, right? So I need to probably hire somebody, have an expert come in, implement that system, see the system get tested, and then call it a day. So there's different tiers of what you can do yourself what you can do yourself with a little bit of investment, and then the things that you need to go call experts on. And that gap analysis, there are certain things that you're going to figure out, hey, we can do that with our staff, or we already have an MSP, or we already, our service provider that we can just tell to go do this, or you know what, this is entirely net new. We don't have anybody inside of our ecosystem, our organization, or our friends that can help us do this. So let's go find somebody else to make that happen. That's the approach, right? Then from there, it's do you only look at your house security once, and then you don't look at it again, and then you sell the house? No, you should be constantly reevaluating yourself, at a very minimum yearly. But honestly, quarterly is not an unreasonable amount of time to be able to go assess or self-assess what you're doing for your organization's security posture. In fact, a lot of boards, a lot of executive leaders are now getting the pressure to be focusing on cybersecurity, that I'd be shocked if they're not asking at least quarterly during their board meetings, hey, what does it look like? And have we improved since the last time we talked? Well, how do you showcase that? You need to continually be assessing your organization. You need to be continually assessing your security. And you need to assess it across a number of different things. So from a tactical standpoint, I told you Matt was spot on with the training. The second biggest one is administrative access abuse. Who has administrative access in your company today? Can everybody on this call right now raise your hand and say definitively, either because you're a smaller shop and you sit in the same office and work with them, or you have a system to be able to identify who has that access? If you can't do that today, I would ask, if you're going to leave this conversation beyond just knowing now who Matt and I are, go find that out and go write that down. Because if you don't know who has the keys to the kingdom, you're going to have a very, very difficult time explaining to anyone, if something does happen, how you didn't know who had keys to your house, right? So take that inventory, do that self-inventory. It should be very straightforward, and you just document it. Get it down in an Excel spreadsheet. Write it on a napkin to start. It doesn't matter, but just get it documented and then look at it with you and your team and go, is this right? Are these the right people who should have administrative access? If not, what do we need to change? And then how do we assess this on a regular basis? So it's like, oh, where did Bob come from? When did Bob suddenly get, administrative access within our organization? Why can he start, reading other people's emails and making changes to our environment? When did that happen? And for how long? Set up that governance, right? It's a quick win. Matt, sorry, go ahead.
No, I hate to interrupt your flow, but I think this might be a really cool spot to actually tie this into the pipeline you mentioned before, because we talked yesterday, the things we know, it doesn't matter how big the organization is, what allowed them to get breached is the same exact thing that's going to allow a 5-person company to get breached. So would you mind just telling us about that?
Sure. Yeah. So look, I'm operating completely off of openly available information that has been put out by forensics experts. FireEye was part of they have a whole background on the dark side group. That is no one knows where they're from, but they speak Russian. So that group is behind the attack, or at least the ransomware software. And what we know about Colonial. So we know we do know this, which is really interesting. Colonial is responsible for 45% of the fuel flow from Texas all the way up to New York, right? And then trucking, extends it that last mile. Colonial didn't have a chief information officer, anyone in charge of IT formally, until 2016. And there's now a woman, I think her name is Mary, I forget her last name. She is now in charge of IT and has been since 2016. On her list of priorities that she's publicly talked about prior to all of this, cybersecurity is third. They have a team of 3 people total by name that you can find out about that work and have anything to do with security. They've been actively looking for a cybersecurity manager for the last 3 months. So what does this tell me? 1, great, congratulations, you have somebody in charge of IT. I'm kind of shocked an organization this size didn't have anybody at the helm until 2016 to go do this. 2, why is the person in charge of IT also in charge of security? You don't let the fox watch the hen house, okay? IT's purpose is operations and efficiency. It does, unfortunately, fall in complete contrast to security, right? Think about it. If I didn't have locks on my door, I'd easily walk into my house. but I have locks on my door, so I have to stop for a second, turn a key, and then I can get in. Why is the guy, like that's kind of the thinking there. So like IT and security, separation. So we know that. That's from a leadership perspective, right? An organizational perspective. Who's in charge? Who's thinking about security for this organization? Are they talking about it to the right people? Are they bringing the risk up to the executives, to the board? We don't know, but we do know that they weren't doing it until recently. And an organization that's been around for this long, kind of expect a little bit more. That being said, a third of the Fortune 500 companies don't have a named CISO. That's a problem. Because I'm a consumer for a lot of those companies, and I want to believe that my data or whatever I'm buying has some security impetus behind it. From a technical standpoint, what we do know is that they had weak email controls. We also know that they had very weak accessibility controls, meaning that from an email standpoint, there wasn't any type of protective capabilities on their Office 365 implementation to look for malicious emails, stop malicious emails, undo, when bad things happen. There's certain email protection capabilities that exist that allow you to kind of rewind, if you will, certain actions. We know that they didn't have that based on how they look on the internet. So I can scan a system right now from my laptop and tell you quite a bit about Colonial Pipeline based on what is publicly available about them on the systems and services that they make available to the public, right? For instance, any of you are running a customer app that your customers or your partners or vendors access over the internet. Well, that has a server and an application and a system behind it that could be vulnerable. Well, what we saw at Colonial is they're running a number of those that were not patched in the last X amount of years or months, and they're being taken advantage of. We also know that their VPN, or when people are remoting into their organization, there wasn't necessarily a good control framework around securing that access, like using multi-factor authentication or restricting certain users coming in to only be able to access certain systems. Well, when you get phished and you give up your credentials, right, or I steal your username and password, it becomes very easy for me to now just usurp and go around and go into your VPN, right, or your remote access with that username and password that I now have from you, and now I'm sitting inside of your network. This is exactly what bad guys are doing. It's really not, I don't want to say it's not that hard, but it's really not that hard. So by getting credentials, getting a username and password for people, and not having MFA, it's very easy to just now jump into a network. So that's why it's really important to implement multi-factor authentication for any type of remote access to either your email, your SaaS provider, any of your systems, especially your internal network. It's as easy as running the app, on your phone, right? Like I log in with my username and password, I get a text or the app on my phone says, hey, was this you, or do you authorize or put this code into the computer and finish logging in? If no one has this physical device from me, they can have my username and password all they want, but they're never going to get in because they don't have this second piece of authentication. It's essentially like having two keys to a house, right? You've got your main one and you got your deadbolt. Well, if the bad guy only has the main door key but doesn't have access to the deadbolt, he's reverting back to trying to kick in the door. So again, low-hanging fruit, just getting rid of the stuff that is baseline. And a lot of these standards that are coming out, a lot of these regulations that are coming out, they're leading with these type of things. Do you have multi-factor in place? Do you have email security in place? Do you have your remote access to your VPN in place? Do you have training, for all of your employees? So these are what we kind of just consider kind of baseline cyber hygiene, right? Very foundational elements to building a security program. Matt, I forget, Matt, did I cover everything kind of from the Colonial piece? Like that just happened.
Yeah, actually, that was great. And as you're talking, the thing that I'm wondering, and I think other people might be wondering or thinking, is okay, great, they're a huge organization, but that could that happen to us?
Well, yeah. So here's the thing. Let me back up and give you a little bit of history lesson of why we have ransomware and all these criminal gangs. So my time in the DoD, we used to track all these clowns. And basically, this is what happened. Russia fell, Soviet Union fell, and all these ex-KGB, ex-Stasi guys were out of jobs. And or they were on the training and they didn't have that type of a place to next go. So now you've got people who have very, very keen skill set to be able to build and manage and run teams of and influence and organize people to do something. During that same time, the Eastern Bloc, you had a really large presence of, computer science and students coming out of these colleges out of the Eastern Bloc who couldn't get jobs. Well, now you've got a workforce and you've got leaders who all live in the same area and they're after basically one thing, which is to survive on what is something new. So out of that, criminal enterprise became a thing. And as long as, Russia and Moscow have kind of two rules. One, you don't target anyone within our, influence and purview. And two, if we ask a favor of you, you respond. So as long as that tie is in place, a lot of these operations are allowed to just continue to operate. Now, what they've figured out is that this is a really, really good business for them. It's actually compounded because of what happened with Bitcoin when they started asking people and demanding ransoms when Bitcoin was like worth $1 to $10 to $100. Unfortunately, what has happened is that these enterprises are now sitting on billions of dollars of value and billions of dollars in the bank, which means now they have a lot of resources and money at their disposal. What's really interesting is these groups are not just some kid in his basement just trying to knock you out. These are well-funded, well-organized, structured enterprises, okay? They have human resources. These folks go on holiday, okay? They have dental and medical plans, okay? There's a structure to this. So a lot of people, kind of think of, oh, it's not really, I don't have to worry about this, what's, some kid gonna do, whatever. If the second you undermine, or underestimate your enemy, you're losing. So we need to first realize that this is a business to them. There is an ROI. There's a return on investment for them to go ransom or attack an organization. And what they do is they've basically created affiliate and channel partnerships where they've created the software packages that they can deploy. So this is the software, and they just run it out or lease it out to different groups and make it, they get money back into them for leasing it out. These folks start attacking victim organizations, and it's a nice little structure. I mean, this is a business structure and enterprise. So the ROI for these folks here is what can we create and how can we kind of spray and hit as many people as we possibly can to now get the most bang for our buck. And what happens is by getting it into channel distribution for these folks to get out and start attacking individual organizations, they're able to now push the ransomware into or attack these other groups and now hold them for a ransom. And what we're actually seeing is these victim organizations their data is being looked at. The things that are being looked at are their insurance policies. What is that insurance policy willing to pay out to as a max? Now that becomes a negotiation tactic that our friends at the top here are able to use against victim organizations. Like, well, I know your insurance company is going to allow you to pay $2 million, so that's what we're asking for. Pay up, done. Right? Like all of you have been in negotiations. If you have any information about the other side and their position, you are in a substantial advantage, and that's exactly what's going on here. Data is the key to all of this, right? Information is the power. So if I'm already in your network and I can look at your statements, who your vendors are, who your customers are, your insurance policy, I now know everything about you, maybe even more about your organization than you do. And I can use that now against you when I'm extorting you or attacking you. Heck, even ransomware off the table. Say I wanted to get into a larger organization and you were a prime vendor to them. We see a lot of attacks happening through smaller organizations to actually attack their real target. So are you actually the target, or are you just a stepping stone? And what happens there is that is why a lot of organizations are being impacted because they might be the stepping stone, or they might not have value today, but these attackers are getting in, sitting and lying in wait until there is something of value. Maybe you're putting out, maybe you're publicly traded. And, you know, I'm going to wait until, you know, just before an announcement to, you know, pop smoke. I don't know. There's a variety of different scenarios that play out once you kind of have inside information and have the ability to lay undetected for a while. So the notion of, well, I'm not a target never sits with me, solely because you are connected to the internet, period. You are in a bad neighborhood, period. So you need to think about, no matter what, how would you adjust your behavior if you were, you know, if you lived in a bad neighborhood? We have to stop thinking about as if we live, you know, in a perfect, you know, place, and we would never be a target, right? Hopefully that helps.
Brian, that's a segue. I want to leave time for everybody to ask questions, but this last slide that I believe everybody can still see my screen. This is what you're talking about. These are the things that everybody on this call should be thinking about doing, and these are more so the tactical tools that come out of the planning and out of the thought process. And we're not going to go deeply into each one, but you mentioned multi-factor, penetration testing, vulnerability management, patch management, ransomware defense. Look, you just explained, and this is the truth. We see it all the time. They cast a wide net, and it's anybody that can be breached will be breached, and it's really about money, and it's getting worse and worse and worse. So it's the cop and robber conversation. We try to stay one step ahead, and these tools that are on the screen are the variety or combination of things that may be things that apply to your environment that you'd want to do. Some of them you certainly should, and I would use the word must do. And frankly, if you choose not to, at least you know what you're choosing not to do. That is, I think, a good way for us to really bring this to the point of, does anybody have any questions? Because we covered a lot. Brian gave an unbelievable explanation of what's really going on behind the scenes and why this matters to everybody. And that was our goal today, to bring you this information to inspire thought. And I'm pretty sure that that's happened on this call. So I encourage you to ask some questions. You know, you got a phenomenal resource here to bounce things off of. Come off mute and just fire them away.
I'm sorry, I have a question. I didn't see anybody else raising a hand.
Go ahead, Jay.
My name is Jay Ciartino with Construction Risk Partners. We are an insurance agent. And Brian, that was fantastic. I could listen to that for hours. Just you probably have some even better stories that you can't tell us. Put those in the book. So in your experience, Matt and Brian, how many uninsured victims do you see versus insured victims? Because you mentioned the insurance policies, and we just had a client that was hacked pretty severely, and it just coincidentally, when the ransom demand came in, it was exactly the same amount as the upper limit of their policy. But what do you see out there from an insurance versus non-insured standpoint?
Yeah, I was the CISO for a Fortune 500 insurance company, and have helped you know, build out cyber insurance products, and have had insight into the insurance world for a while. Truth be told, I actually grew up. My dad started as an underwriter, worked for the same insurance company, the home insurance, which became Zurich, which is why we lived in Newark and he worked in the city for 35 years. So I grew up underneath an underwriter. So it was a bit of a joke in my family when I left the military, like he did after NAM, to go work for an insurance company. I left the DoD to go work for an insurance company. The insight I have, I think, is, and maybe we don't put the Q&A into the recording, Matt, but I have a view of how cyber insurance is almost useless, or incorrectly applied. And the reality is, your ML, your GL, your other policies have standards in them, and if you don't have a cyber insurance policy, you're going to try to file a claim against that first because you don't have specific cyber. And the way that exceptions are being written into policies now, and the way the claims are being denied or not, you should gravitate towards a specific cyber insurance policy. But the problem, though, is that you're actually paying twice for the same thing. The insurance carriers got smart and figured out, hey, if we can accept out of this policy and now magically create this other one, I'm going to sell you two policies for essentially what you were getting underneath maybe one of your other, commercial line ones. Underneath cyber, you've got to be really diligent about what does it cover. And that requires you to be a really informed buyer of your policy. You cannot rely on your broker to be that, right? He or she is getting a commission based on what they are selling to you for the carrier. They are not necessarily on your side from a buyer's perspective. So they want you to buy that policy. What you need to be able to do is you need to be able to push the use cases that would be most applicable to you against your carrier. You've got to what if scenario these things. You've got to actually you can't just, oh, the limits are good, let's buy that, right? We can afford that premium. You really need to dig in and go, hey, listen, for our business, a bad day would look like this, okay? And we think a bad day looking like that could be caused by this type of activity or this type of activity or this type of activity. Would our policy cover that? Yes or no? You have to do that exercise. A lot of people just blindly just buy the cyber insurance policy because they hear it and think, oh, anything that happens underneath that, I can follow a claim underneath it. The reality is, when you read the exceptions, when you pressure test the use cases, you will find that a lot of those things are not covered. And you have to look at the controls you have in your organization to be able to figure out if you would actually meet the needs and the demands of those exceptions. A lot of them are like, hey, AXA just came out and started in France, and I know it's going to turn around. They will not issue a new cyber insurance policy unless you as a company have implemented at least multi-factor authentication and a lot of other foundational aspects, period. You will not be eligible for a policy. So insurance is now pushing those controls, but you have to look at yourself and figure out, am I doing those controls? Or did I buy the insurance policy thinking I don't have the controls, insurance will cover it? Bad thing happens, you file the claim gets denied. Or worse, claim gets approved, then you get sued later because your carrier finds out you weren't actually doing the controls you said you were when you applied for the insurance. And I've seen that happen more than probably claims just outright getting denied. So you've really got to pressure test your broker, the carrier, whomever, on that policy as you're buying it. Do not just add that additional coverage and call it a day. Hopefully that was helpful, and hopefully I didn't scare you. I usually get this whole like, Brian, you scared the hell out of me, and like I'm gonna go, like I'm now upset after talking to you. I get a lot of that when I start sharing stories and like insights. So I didn't think I scared you, Jay, but like, hopefully that was not too much for you to be like, oh Christ, I gotta sit down with my CFO and like we gotta go through this with a fine-tooth comb.
No. I think you're right about the pressure test. The only thing I take exception to is that the brokers only want the money. Believe me, I don't want to be sitting out there, with a client that has a cyber loss and doesn't have the right coverage or any coverage in place. I mean, that would be bad for business. But my only suggestion, to anyone on the call is that, that you enlist people like Matt and Brian in the process, because one, that'll help you get the best terms and conditions. Because Brian, you mentioned that AXA will only now sell a policy if you have certain things in place. And if something, God forbid, does happen, they can help guys like Matt and Brian help mitigate the damage. And I can tell you this stuff is getting more expensive every single day because, like Brian said in the beginning, more things happening out there than we even know. And I'm finding them out firsthand because we've had probably almost 10 cyber losses amongst our clients, and not all of them were insured losses. So,
Jay, have you seen?
Matt and Brian are invaluable in that whole process of buying insurance and having the right stuff in place.
Thanks, Jay. I was curious, have you seen, just in your view, we're seeing a lot of folks trying to put claims, like ransomware claims, up through their K&R, or the kidnap and ransom insurance. Have you seen that trend?
No, I've not seen that.
Yeah,
And some of the policies that provide, like you said, duplicate coverage, they're such small sublimits that they're almost useless. And
yeah.
the carriers are putting in very specific cyber exclusions for the GL and for the property, and just to make sure that there's no overlap of coverage, and you're getting the right coverage. I mean, if it's written right, the premiums are right. Yeah, but not kidnap and ransom.
I've had a discussion with a mid-market commercial leader out of the Midwest, and she's seeing, she basically, their K&R book just got destroyed because of this. Like, oh.
That's fantastic. Jay, thank you. Really, I think it was really valuable. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? Well, in that case, I'm going to respect everybody's time. We'll keep this right on schedule. We did record this because we're going to give it to the UTCA to, if they decide to, and if everybody's okay with it, we would have them distributed to the rest of your fellow members. Really, it's a great conversation. I want to thank everybody for joining. Brian, thank you. As always, just tremendous amount of information. It's invaluable. And we are here. We're available. I believe, let's see. We always, just to point out, if anybody wants to work with us, we do always have a package that we offer to the members. It's 30% off. We always honor that. And this is our contact information down below, but you guys can look us up. We're in the book that you guys all have. We're in the directory. That's our main phone number, 664-9500. Matt Kosha, who's on this call, is the person that directly works with the UTCA representatives. He speaks with them constantly. And really, we're here as a guide. Even if you choose not to work with us, this is what we really want to do for you, is just answer questions. If you want to bounce questions off of us, kind of to get a second opinion on the people that you're currently using for cybersecurity or IT, just reach out to us. We'll give you our opinion. We'll tell you if we think they're doing right by you, and we'll just be a seat at the table, with you for a minute or two, just to make sure that you're getting the best advice, or at the very least, we'll give you an opinion and something else to think about. The main thing is that we've given you valuable information today, and I want to thank you guys all for joining, and look forward to seeing you guys. Matt Kosha, did the golf outing happen yet? Matt Kosha?
No, I believe that's coming up in a couple of months.
Okay, so we will be there, and hopefully they're having it, and so we look forward to seeing everybody. So again, thank you, Brian. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and have a great day.